I'm a physicist, this is how it really works. I was 6 when I took apart my first radio. I needed to understand what moved inside it. My father never said a word. He just stepped over the pieces and went to bed. The librarian asked if I was sure that was the right book. I told her I had already read the others. The teacher made an error on the board. I corrected him. He never fully forgave me for that. The first cigarette tasted terrible. I finished it anyway. I was stubborn that way. I finished an hour early. I did not check my answers. I already knew they were correct. First lecture on theoretical physics. The professor said matter was mostly empty space. I felt that personally. My roommate played guitar. I read physics papers. We understood each other perfectly without speaking. I watched people form groups like molecules clustering. I never found a reason to join one. He explained what the radiation could do to tissue. I found it more interesting than dangerous. Parties were just noise with a social contract attached. I preferred the lab at night. The universe is mostly cold and empty. Standing in that cold was the closest I got to honesty. They ran out of questions. The chairman just wrote the grade. Nobody smiled. That was enough. They said the work was for national defense. I asked about the physics. They said that was classified. The lab was 3 floors underground. The air smelled like ozone and old secrets. I felt at home. The equations were beautiful. They described forces that could level a city block in under a second. The others went home at 8. I stayed until the equations stopped resisting. Sometimes that was 3 a.m. The numbers worked. Every single one. I held the proof in my hands and understood what I had done. They did not ask about the science. They asked how fast it could be built. I told them 3 years. I looked at myself for a long time. I was not sure yet what I had agreed to become. 3 years, 4 months, 11 days. I stood at the window and waited for my own calculation to prove itself. The wave distorted everything inside a 2-kilometer radius. Not a nuclear reaction, something entirely new. The ground looked like it had been folded by something that had no patience for physics as we knew it. He signed the authorization. He did not read what he was approving. That was the first mistake. 3 prototypes, each one calibrated to the same specifications, each one completely untraceable. The doctor said radiation exposure was above acceptable levels. I asked him what acceptable meant in this context. I coughed more that winter. I told myself it was the dry air in the facility. That was easier. 1 prototype was missing. The report said 7 people were involved. I understood what that meant. I built it to be theoretical leverage. I did not build it to be sold. Those were very different things. They were using my weapon's existence as a threat. It had not been deployed and was already spreading fear. The radio described a standoff. Each side convinced the other had my weapon. Neither one was bluffing. I tried to reach my handler 6 times. The phone rang and rang. That silence told me everything. The pattern of damage was unmistakable. My equation, my calibration. Someone used it on a neighborhood. The guard watched me from the shadows. I think he was checking if I was about to do something reckless. I tried to stop the second prototype. The commander said the decision was above both of us. Second use. Different city. Same geometric collapse radius. They were testing the effective range. I sat with blank paper for 3 nights. The equations I needed to write would have ended my career. The X-ray showed something in both lungs. I asked the doctor for a cigarette. He said that was the problem. 3 incidents. International media. The weapon had a name now. None of them knew who built it. I had done and why. I sealed it. I carried it for 6 weeks before I burned it. The investigators asked what I intended. I explained the physics. They asked about intent. Different question. They were already building a 4th. They did not need me anymore. They had copied my equations. I watched people carry groceries and argue about nothing. I tried to remember when I had done that. The cough had changed pitch. I washed my hands and kept not looking at the mirror. That takes discipline. They reduced me to a consultant. Someone had copied every equation they needed. I had become a liability. International crisis. 5 countries mentioned. The weapon I designed was now a geopolitical variable. I found a bug in my jacket. I put it back. Let them hear nothing interesting. That was the message. I understood what that meant. I had understood for months. I finished the work day anyway. I wrote what I could leave behind without enabling them. The pure theory. The part still just science. They restricted my movement to the facility perimeter. I walked 800 steps every morning. Exactly 800. 5 separate factions, 1 weapon architecture, each convinced the others had more. I had made perfect chaos. I told him what the numbers would do to anyone in a 3-block radius. He put the chalk down. At night, I listened to my own lungs working. I had studied forces that destroy matter. Never studied this. They gave me 2 hours outside the wire. I went to a cemetery. The quiet was the only honest thing left. I gave him a warning, not a formula. How to recognize the work and how to stop the next one. The medic told me what I already knew. I asked him to leave. I wanted to think, not to be managed. 7 incidents. Civilian zones now. The weapon had moved past industrial targets into neighborhoods. He was 42 years old. I am eternity, consuming all that lives, and I have come here to erase this world from the face of existence.